From VTV Channel 6 Studios in downtown Vernal, this is Local Point with your host, Chris Piner.
Welcome to Local Point, sponsored by Ashley Regional Medical Center. I'm David Galen for Chris Piner today. We have a special treat for you this show, a visit with our elected state government in the form of Lieutenant Governor Greg Bell. Now, time is short. There's plenty to cover, so let's get right to the topics. Thank you for joining us today,
Great
Lieutenant Governor.
Great to be here, David.
Recently, we had the State of the State address. A lot was talked about when it comes to jobs, so let's talk about the overall economy of the state. How are we doing?
Well, everyone knows what a terrible time we've had nationally and internationally, and it's been difficult coming out of this crisis as it was. I mean, you think back to 2007 and 8, and here we are in 2011. So we've been living with this thing. Utah did not, in any sense, go to the depth that the rest of the states have. We've really been very, very lucky in avoiding some of the very serious consequences of that problem. Still, we've been hit, and if you're out of work, it doesn't really matter how high the rate is, right? It's hard, and the basin certainly has shared in that, having its own struggle because of its concentration in the energy sector. However, the state continues to just be recognized around the nation and around the world for the tremendous economy we have. Forbes named us recently as the best place to do business and the best place for careers. So we are getting a lot of kudos. The governor in his State of the State, as you mentioned, emphasized jobs, and that's what it's all about. So we're trying to grow our economy through keeping taxation low, keeping regulations simple and plain and predictable. We're having lots of companies come in and say, we like the environment in Utah. As that relates to the basin, of course, we've got some air quality concerns relative to drilling oil and gas production. We've got some public land issues that are very, very troublesome. The governor welcomed BLM Director Robert Abbey about a couple of weeks ago, I guess, to Utah to explain the Secretary's new order relative to wild lands. It's a highly controversial designation that we think seems to attempt to skirt the limits Congress has placed upon the agency to designate any more wilderness. So the easy argument is that the administration has just said, well, we won't designate any more wilderness, we'll just designate wild lands, which happen to mean exactly what
just
wilderness
change the name.
is.
So, you know, when you talk about growing jobs, especially here in the basin, and you know, we've got an energy-based economy, and you have to balance that with Secretary Salazar's edicts and overall general environmentalism. How does the state do that? It's got to be quite a balancing act.
It is a very difficult act, you know, and we can negotiate or we can litigate. We've litigated, we've just kind of thrown red meat around for a lot of years and haven't accomplished much, and so we have a federal administration that's a different flavor than our Republican group out here, our government, you know. So the question is, do we just sit and wait for a new election, or do we try to get something done? And the governor has decided, look, let's continue talking. He's talked to the Secretary of Interior more than any other governor. He's talked to the director of BLM. So we are negotiating. We're trying as much as possible to keep those lines open, meeting with BLM, trying to streamline the process for applications for oil and gas permits.
I make a lot of people out here very happy to get those permits. Okay, we only have like 30 seconds, but I wanted to jump over to immigration reform, because that quite honestly has a lot to do with jobs out here as well. What's going on statewide?
We're just going to have to see. It's a complex subject. It's really a federal issue, but they've defaulted, so the state's going to jump in. And I think at the end of the session we'll have a bill that will deal partly with enforcement, but will also define what an immigrant can do.
Okay. Well, we'll talk hopefully a little bit more about that after this break. So stay with us. We're going to talk about current legislation being introduced on the state level. First, though, here's a message from our sponsor of Local Point. That'd be Ashley Regional Medical Center. We'll be right back.
Ashley Regional Medical Center now offers neonatal services and a Level 2 nursery, along with our quality obstetrical services. The Level 2 nursery provides state-of-the-art monitoring and clinical care for infants at 32 weeks and older. The team of skilled nurses, pediatricians, and family practice physicians, along with Medical Director Dr. Daniel Kwok, neonatologist, help Ashley Regional Medical Center offer your infant excellent care right here at home.
Welcome back. Thanks again for joining us with Lieutenant Governor Greg Bell in the studio today. We're going to go from talking about immigration reform bills now to elections, because you, technically one of your titles is Chief Election Officer. What exactly does that mean anyway?
It means that my office is over all elections in the state of Utah. That's a little over-descriptive because the clerks in every county have the responsibility, and then clerks in cities. But we work very closely together, and it's a nice fabric that we have throughout the state, and former lieutenants governor have done a very, very nice job with it, so we have good relationships with our clerks.
That's good. What do you see as far as issues that you are coming up against that the state is facing right now when it comes to elections?
A couple of things. Number one, 15, 20 years ago, Utah was the gold standard in terms of voter turnout, and now we're abysmal. We're not doing so well. Part of that is attributable to the younger folks who, when we moved the vote down to age 18, have not participated as we had hoped. Don't know exactly why they're not as engaged. Maybe, we've got some social communication type issues, social media, different engagement issues there. Maybe because of the one-party state, we have maybe some feeling that my vote doesn't really count, so we're looking into that. We're working with the media around the state, and we really want to understand more, because we need a robust electoral system so people can be involved. If they're not voting, shame on them, because they can't complain. They didn't do anything about it.
What are you doing with other media? I know that we've talked earlier about newspapers.
Right. The
polling?
Newspapers in particular are very interested in this, because they're trying obviously to migrate over to the internet to stay alive, and they're figuring out how do you make a profit in producing news content, but it doesn't actually hit the form of a paper on the street. And so they're interested in working with us in keeping an informed electorate, and we're just going to see what's going to work and what doesn't.
Right. Speaking of the internet, we were talking earlier about initiatives and using this new medium of the internet as a place to go to get people to maybe voice their opinion, to actually have a vote or have a say in something. But there's some difficulties with this.
That's right. As you know, it's very hard to gather signatures. I mean, you have to stand in cold parking lots and ask people on Saturday afternoon, will you sign this thing? And they don't know about it. Some will, some won't. And we had a controversial initiative about ethics. It was sponsored by a group called Utahns for Ethical Government. And as the time drew near for their deadline, they decided to go electronic and had people sign up on the internet. I ruled that really wasn't in keeping with the state of our laws. We don't really care. We just interpret the law. There are bills before the legislature, I think, that will at least put a moratorium, if not bar that practice for the time being till we figure out the protocols, because as anyone knows, in the internet, it's just really difficult to have the confidence in the integrity of the system. So we got to figure that out.
Sure. And for those who may say, well, what's wrong? I mean, I go on Facebook every day, and I know who I'm talking to, and I use the internet for anything. What could be the complications with somebody going, oh, hey, I agree with that, and signing up as a signature online?
Well, voting is sacred, registration is sacred, and you want to make almost absolutely sure that you have no fraud. If you have any whiff of fraud, then people lose confidence in the system. And anything that's not paper-based has a very difficult time gaining credibility. Clearly, we can't do everything in paper anymore, and I think the trend will be towards more electronic registration, electronic voting, electronic registration with initiatives. But we've got to figure it out so that we have the security element done.
All right. Any idea right now how much of the state, just I realize I'm just throwing this at you and you may not have any idea, a guesstimate of where we are using electronic voting right now in polling places?
It's throughout the state. It's a uniform system throughout the state. Sometimes counties, or I'm sorry, cities and small elections will go to paper, but by and large, we're using electronic voting machines.
All right. We're pretty much out of time. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell the people out here?
Yeah, I do. I want to tell them that I really enjoy coming to the Basin. I love the people out here. I've made some wonderful friends. I think it's a great lifestyle, and I think it's a tremendous place.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming
David.
out here. Thank
Nice
you for joining us, everyone, and hope to see you next time on Local Point.